Hello, and welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Magazine podcast. I'm Chris Eggett, the editor of the magazine. Today we're talking to Ellie Dix about family gaming and turning your family into a board gaming family. We also get Ellie's top 5 family games, and we discuss teaching games to children. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners to start off with?
Sure. I'm Ellie Dix. I'm a board game designer and I own a very small publishing company called The Dark Imp, which is thedarkimp.com. I design games for families and I've written a book called The Board Game Family: Reclaim Your Children from the Screen, which is all about how to get into board games as a parent if you want your family to get into board games, what the benefits of doing that are, and the challenges you might face and how to overcome them. So there's quite a bit about managing behaviour in there and behaviour around the game table, as well as just why you might want to play board games and what kind of board games you might like to play.
That's great, yeah. And we talked a bit off mic about the idea of like gaming families.
Yes.
And how not everyone's sort of blessed with a hobbyist gaming family. And
True.
So hopefully today we're going to sort of work out the best techniques for turning your family from a normal family into a better family, which is a gaming family.
Exactly.
So I think it's something we all do, which is we all sit down with a game and a group of people, and we overestimate people's ability to engage.
Yep.
Often, this happens with adults as well. A group of people who say, "Oh yeah, I like board games," and then you say, "Okay, great, we'll sit down, we'll play something," and you bring something to the table which for you seems fairly simple and straightforward, but when you've got to describing what the fourth track does and how it interacts with the value of a certain supply, you could sort of tell that maybe you've misjudged the table. So
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, actually.
And that's and obviously that's something that happens with kids as well. So
it is. I mean, as you say, it happens with everybody. And I think it's a really common thing for most gamers that they get really excited about a game. They love it. They get really into it. They see all the pros and then they just want to share that, because that's what we do. We want to share those experiences with other people. And it's natural to want to share them with all your closest friends and family, because those are the people you want to have the most, meaningful experiences with. So your enthusiasm and your excitement sometimes can be thwarted and cut off, and you can be really disappointed when others don't appear to share your enthusiasm. And so I think we all are guilty of trying to make everybody else like the games that we like. And that's just as true with my husband as it might be with my children. But I do think that there are games that each person, I mean, there must be some people out there that just don't like any games at all. I'm glad I don't have those in my family or in my friendship group. But I think by and large, there is a type of game or some games for most people, and it's really about us. If we are going to try and get other people into board gaming, it's really about making sure that we are engaging them in the kind of games that they're going to want to be engaged in, and that's really challenging. And it's the same with children. So trying not to impose your favourite new, really heavy, complex strategy game on children as the first thing that they learn, just because you love it, is probably a good plan.
Yeah, I think this is something that's happened to me directly as well, where I've so my daughter's very, very young, but friends of mine, they have maybe 4-year-olds and or 3-4-year-olds, and you get to a point where you kind of just treat them like a normal person in your house who's just a bit smaller and needs different things. But then when it comes to actually playing the game, you realise that the concept of, for example, taking turns doesn't quite arrive to them naturally.
Sure.
And so I've had experiences where I've said, "Oh, we'll play this game," and then it's like, "Oh, no, we won't," because the basic concepts aren't there. So obviously there's a threshold for when you can introduce kids to sort of hobby games. But
Yeah.
but what do you think? What's sort of I guess the minimum age that you start introducing kids or that
Well,
sort
I
of thing?
think it really depends on what you're going to play, doesn't it? And I think, we're very, we talk about hobby games and different people mean different things by that. And what someone's hobby game, one person's hobby game might be another one's quite mainstream offering, really. There's cliques within cliques, aren't there, I suppose, and specialisms within that. So, I mean, I think obviously that there are games that are designed for children that and commonly like the Habba games that we enjoy playing anyway. I mean, who doesn't love Rhino Hero? I mean, really. But they are. I suppose most of those games for the very young, we might not be that interested in playing as adults. So it's really about finding games that suit each age group, and that can be challenging, and that can be a trial and error process. Really, they'll learn how to take turns when they're playing. Like the orchard games and things, my children used to like Red Dog, Blue Dog, but by God, it's so boring as an adult. And so you're just desperate for them to grow up a bit so they can do something else. But the experience of just playing any game, any child's game, will teach them how to take turns and will teach them the concept of we're working within rules. We are moving components on a board. These are tiles. These are boards. This is what a dice does. This is how you roll it. Those sorts of things we learn and we build on. But I suppose most, and I'm going to, gosh, the age ranges on games, I think, are quite contentious anyway. But I would say that most games could be played from age 8 upwards.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think it depends on the game and the context
Yep.
that
Yep.
the game is being played in.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think it's not just, there are children where children may struggle, that any game that requires knowledge, trivia knowledge, extended vocabulary, they're not going to be able to compete on a level playing field with adults until they're quite, I mean, possibly until they're, in their 20s. But I mean, yeah, that's fair. I think when I was a child, we were still playing the children's Trivial Pursuit questions when I was at university, because you build your knowledge over time.
Yes.
I don't think I'd get away with it now with my dad, though.
Uh,
Younger children, they are going to struggle with dexterity. So
true, yes.
and if anything that requires you to do things quickly, or to hold things in a certain way, or to do very detailed things. I mean, I'm thinking of Tokyo Highway and things where you're balancing. You've got to be very careful with what you put in different places. Those things appeal to children, but they can't really compete on a level playing field until they have command of their dexterity. Anything that requires a lot of writing is going to be challenging for children, younger ones particularly, and reading. So word games are, I usually think of family games as games where children can compete with adults on not necessarily a level playing field, in that they might not win, but they can take part as fully as adults can. And I think that's really critical in a family game. The other areas that children often are lacking in are patience.
Yes.
Which is so important, and particularly when we're teaching games to children. This is the main problem that we have, I think, as parents, is actually teaching new games to children. Once they know them, they can play them. That's why they keep wanting to go back to the Game of Life and Connect Four and Monopoly and the ones that they know, because they don't have to be taught it again. They know how to play it. And so once they've learnt a game and they're familiar with it and they've got some practice with it, and they don't have to refer to the rules and they don't have to sit through you telling them what to do, then they're going to be much able to engage much better. So patience is really low with many children, with many adults as well,
Yes.
but with many children. So
We forgive the
yeah.
children, though, of course.
Yeah, particularly for children. I actually think that's the biggest challenge that we have as parents. That is the biggest difference with playing with children from playing with anyone else. There are other things like okay, children cannot often, some can, but this comes with age. So my 17-year-old is particularly brilliant at this, but he's 17, right? He's almost an adult. Most children really struggle to see the full to be able to see the full consequences of the actions they're taking in the moment.
Yes,
so
yes.
they'll be able to
I
see.
struggle with that personally.
Yeah, well, it does come through practice, right? The more games you play, the more you're used to it, the more you start to see how the things fit together and what might happen in the future. And yeah, many people struggle with that. Some people don't bother with it because it's too mentally taxing. I mean, I don't particularly sit there and think, oh my gosh, if I make this action, if I do this, what's going to happen in 3 turns' time? But there's a difference between what I'm naturally doing in terms of my planning ahead and what most children, particularly sort of, I suppose, 8, 9, 10, that kind of age of child, is going to be able to do. So they might well be able to see the immediate impact of their actions and know that, oh, I want to get that, so I've got to do that. But they might not be able to see, well, if I don't do this before this time, then I'm not going to be able to do all of this stuff I might want to do later. Or, oh my goodness, somebody else is about to do this, and that means for me that my game plan isn't going to work in a few turns' time. Or all of those sorts of things. That's really hard for children.
It's very frustrating as well, because there's also a point where you, as the parent and the person teaching the game, you have to say, no, you can't do that. And that's not a great position to be in when you're meant to be having fun, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another reason why it's really difficult for parents to teach children and to play with their own children. Sometimes it's easier when you're teaching other people's children, when you're playing with other people's children, or when you're doing it as a teacher, because the response you get when you say, no, you can't do that, is better than if you're a parent. With our own children, we've got to be careful about the kinds of things we say to them to keep them engaged, and that's challenging because you want to say, no, don't do that, you're crazy, you're going to not be able to do anything else if you do that now. But you've got to let them learn from their own mistakes, and it can be very challenging as a child when you see your parents beating you all the time. And I mean, my younger son is 13, and we play quite a lot of much heavier games. We play a lot of Terraforming Mars, so we probably play
That's
that.
Really heavy.
Yeah, it's really heavy. We play that probably 2 or 3 times a week at the moment during lockdown. The 3 of us, me and my 17-year-old and 13. Yeah. And the 17-year-old almost always wins because he has this amazing ability to plan out his actions turns in advance. And the 13-year-old almost always loses. And he gets to the end of every game and says, I don't understand why I lost again. I kept making good decisions. I sort of copied what Alfie did last time. How did I lose again? And he's desperate to work it out, but all I keep saying to him is, you are learning every time you play. Every time you play, you're getting better. Every time you play, you're thinking about decisions in a different way, and you're using your experience from previous times to inform your decision making. And I can't give you a one reason why you didn't win. I mean, Terraforming Mars isn't like that. You might have only lost by 3 points. I mean, God, I can't pick that apart.
No, it's I mean, I think for a lot of people, just hearing you say that, you know, I play Terraforming Mars with my two children 3 times a week or whatever it is. That sounds like a dream. And so, how do we get there?
Well, I suppose the reason that kids might stick to mainstream family games, as I said before, is because they know them and they know how to play them. They're easy to pick up and get started with. We've all got this sort of fondness for games that we know. And this is why we play Terraforming Mars 3 times a week, because they know how to play and they want to keep playing it. So I have got shelves of unplayed games, which for all they know might be as brilliant as Terraforming Mars. But we can't get them to the table because they want to play Terraforming Mars. So it just depends what you know. And so there is this sort of challenge about how do you introduce new things. I think, we have to be very careful not to impose games on children. Letting the kids choose what they want to play is, letting them have ownership is really important. So, having some sort of way of choosing what game you're going to play where people are happy and the children feel like they've had some sort of part of the decision making is crucial. It's no good saying, right, everybody, I've been wanting to play this game for ages. It hasn't happened yet. You're all going to come and sit down at the table. That works sometimes, but they have to be in that frame of mind. I actually did that yesterday and it did work. But yeah.
What did you play yesterday?
We played Magnificent.
And I don't know that one. Go on, tell me about it.
It's a sort of the criticism that it's had is that its theme is fairly loose. So it's got a sort of circus setting, really, that you're a ringmaster and you're trying to create different circus acts. You have characters that are going to perform, and you have to get tents that they're going to perform in, and you match them up. And it's simple in that you have 3 different actions, but it's a huge board. There's a huge amount of components. There's lots of different bits and tracks that and various things. And it's one of those sort of crunchy decision making. Can I do this? Oh no, I need one more gem to be able to do that. So that worked yesterday, but I'm very careful whenever I want to teach a new game to my children that I play it fully through myself beforehand.
That's a very good tip, isn't it?
Yeah, I think because children have no patience or much more limited patience, you have to make sure that you are properly prepared to teach a new game, and so. The most important thing, the most important rule, I have several rules about teaching games, but the most important rule is that you learn it properly yourself beforehand. So that means, for me, that doesn't just mean reading the rule book. That means reading the rule book, watching a video, and playing a full game through. If it's got a single player mode, sometimes I might do that, but most of the time I'll play a 2-player version and just be 2 players. And the only games you really struggle to do that with are games with any kind of hidden information where the game itself, like, for example, Cryptid or some sort of deduction game, where the information that one player's got is going to spoil it if you know it. The point of the game is trying to work it out, and you can't really suspend your disbelief I usually play left hand versus right hand, and you can't really do that in that sort of game.
Yeah, you can't do split brain, can we?
No, you can't. I wish I could. Yes. That'd be really cool. But yeah, speed games are also really difficult to play if you're being 2 people. You can't really do that. I've had this from trying to play test my own games. There are some that you just have to, give to a group of playtesters to try without doing yourself at all at home, and that's pretty scary. Anyway, avoid imposing games on the kids. Let them choose what they want to play. I would say, if it's a good idea so we listen to quite a lot of when we are out and about, and obviously we're not out and about at the moment, but when we're in the car and I'm driving the kids around, we will listen to podcasts, board game podcasts, and I'll have it on and they'll be listening as well, and I will be really tuning in slightly, to the podcast, of course, but also to what they say, to their comments on things, to what they're interested in, to the ideas that appeal to them. And I'll be thinking, okay, well, if I buy quite a lot of games, maybe I should buy the things that they're most interested in playing, because they're going to get more time at the table. So that's and watching videos together as well. If you can, they kind of lead you in the right directions that they want to take. I suppose, working up to it as well. You've got to work up. You can't just say, let's start with Terraforming Mars. You've got to build up to that over time. And we've been playing Terraforming for about, I suppose, 3 years or something. So that was when the youngest one was about 10, maybe 9, something. Well, maybe somewhere around there. So we've been playing it a while. But he's been playing all manner of games since he was really small. So he already had quite a lot of the concepts that he'd need to be successful in playing a game. So yeah, you have to work up to it. You have to look, I suppose, look for games that have short explanations as well. Easy concepts, but that offer a depth of decision making when you're actually playing. Because, those are the kind of perfect games for kids, right? Explanation is really quick, but the gameplay is really interesting. The concept is really easy to grasp, but your brain is burning because of all the different things that you can do, the different choices you can make. And that's good, because then you can start playing as quickly as you can.
So that's some really good rules for bringing kids into the fold. Have you got any good examples of I suppose gateway games for kids? Because we talk about the term like gateway game as well as a way to get other grown-ups into the hobby mostly.
Yep.
But often they're the perfect way to bring kids into the hobby side of things.
Yep, they are.
Yeah.
I think that the definitions of gateway game and family game are a little bit woolly. What different people would give different labels to the same games based on their own experiences.
How would you define each of those?
Well, I suppose family games, as I said before, are those which children can take part in on a level playing field. That doesn't mean they're going to win, but they can understand the rules and make decisions and understand the actions they're going to take and the benefits that they're going to get from taking those actions. Lots of modern board games are designed to allow multiple strategies to be successful, and many of them reward specialism and generalization, which is really good because you can often find that you're rewarded for any decision you make, which is brilliant for a family game. You might not be rewarded as well as if you had a really carefully thought through strategy, but you still feel as if you've accomplished something and that you're getting something. And I think that most games that you describe as gateway games do the same. I mean, the aim of gateway games is to bring new players into the hobby. You want to allow newer gamers to experience success within a game, just like you want to allow children to experience success within a game, a success that they've kind of created themselves rather than one that's been handed to them by luck.
I think that's a pretty good breaking between those two different things there. Well, if they are that different at all. I suppose for me, I was kind of imagining that a gateway game would be something that kind of sort of expresses its mechanics really clearly to you often. So it's themed but with abstraction, whereas a family game often starts with theme and then you sort of lean on that more than the mechanical side. But that's kind of you're right. That's the only difference really.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that the theme. I mean, when I design games, sometimes I start with the mechanic rather than the theme. But the theme seems to be very important for family games because it's a good hook. And it allows children to feel like they're in the world of the game. And that's possibly more important for children than it is for some adults. I think it's equally important for some adults, but I think it's nice because you can kind of create a whole story around the theme of a game.
My example for this, for like a really good theme and family game is Horrified, which is a Raven.
Oh, it's brilliant.
It's good, isn't it?
It's brilliant.
And it's like it's kind of just
one of my top 5 family games.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it really is. It's brilliant.
For all of the latest game reviews and news, make sure that you subscribe to Tabletop Gaming Magazine. Go to www.tabletopgaming.co.uk for our digital edition and paper magazine offers.
it's kind of a fetch quest in lots of ways. You kind of wander around collecting things, going to places, doing a thing. But yes, the elements of it, because you've got this reducing deck of events or monster cards, and you're being chased by Dracula or something. There is this whole very cinematic thing of you take this, I'll give you this, you go over there, you do this thing, pass it to that person, and then we win properly.
Yep. Yes, exactly. You can see the sorts of actions you need to take and the order that you need to take them, possibly. Though it does tension very well, doesn't it? That game, it's really good, and the story and the atmosphere is it's very evocative of a dark town late at night with all these frightened villagers wandering around, and only you can save the day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also
a great game.
It scratches. Sorry, we're just talking about the game now, but it just scratches that thing of in the back of your brain when you're playing a game like this, where it's because you have multiple setups, you have different monster combinations you can have and things like that. You're always thinking, I wonder what would be different next time if I played it slightly different. I think that's a really good hook for family games.
Yeah, it's really good, and the fact that you can change it to be easier and only have 2 monsters to battle, or change it, make it really hard and have 4, and the combinations of those different monsters just give you different experiences and different feelings to the challenge ahead of you. I mean, I think cooperative games can be challenging. I mean,
yes.
The kind of your gut feeling and I think it's very different for different families, but I think the gut feeling should be that, or is for many people, cooperative games, we cooperate, and it should be easier and more harmonious to play a cooperative game because we're all working together towards the same objective rather than competing with each other. But I find sometimes that you can see the opposite, that the challenge of getting the children to agree is quite difficult. So you have to be careful, as in many cooperatives, that you don't end up with a sort of alpha player, and that one person is kind of pulling against everybody else and trying to make the decisions.
Quarterbacking the situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that can cause some... if you manage that as a parent, if you can manage the sort of equality of the decision making in a cooperative game, then I think they work really well. But it's not always easy to do that when you've got the natural sort of relationships between the children and the dynamics between them playing out on the table.
So I suppose we've started a list, really, haven't we? Should we talk about your top 5?
Let's go for the other 4 of my 5 top games.
Sorry to have stumbled in there.
No, it's good, but it means we're on the same wavelength and that we've got some of the same ideas. So I mean, I've tried to think about this to give variety, because I'm obviously, I only have one family myself, and my family is like certain things and other families like other things, and I've been really fascinated when I've played with other people, other adults, and they've gone on to play with their families, I've been fascinated to learn what they like most and what their favourite family games are. So this is my list, but also a wider list, if you see what I mean, kind of from more families than my own. So Telestrations is probably I think the best family party game that you're going to find. Do you know Telestrations?
I don't know. Please enlighten me.
Okay. Telestrations is the most ridiculous. It's a bit like Picture Consequences. So the sort of consequences game or Chinese Whispers. It's like Chinese Whispers but drawing. So you start with a word. Everybody starts with a different word. You get some cards. You don't need the cards. There is a board. It comes in a box. You can buy Telestrations. You could also play it with paper and a dictionary. Each person starts with a word. You write down. So you get these little books within the game. Everybody writes their name on the front of a book, and then on the first page, they're going to write their word down. I think it's that, or maybe you start with a picture, and then you pass it on, and you look at the page that somebody has written on before, and it's either going to be a drawing or a word. And if it's a drawing, you write the word that you think the drawing is about, or the phrase. And if it's a word, you draw it. and then you pass it on. So it goes around. It's great when you're playing with quite a large group of people. If you've got 10 people or something, it's brilliant because the book goes round, it completely changes, and then you see what's happened. And I think there must be scoring, but I've no idea what the scoring is. Never used scoring. It's just for fun. It's just it's a game that you play just for fun, really. The delight the sort of peals of laughter that go around the room when somebody gets a new book. You could just have people sort of just silently crying with laughter as they're looking at the pictures, and then going back through the books and seeing what everybody's, the journey that a word has taken. Is brilliant. It's really good. So that's a good party game for families. In Board Game Geek it says 12 plus.
That sounds wrong.
I just don't know where to start with that. Any time you can hold a pen properly. I think, just as an aside, some of the ages that we see on board games, partly that might be to do with the tests that you have to put your board game through if they're for under a certain age. Like they have to go through toxicity testing and stuff, and it's much more rigorous the younger, therefore. So partly it could be to do with that. Sometimes I've noticed it's to do with theme. So Age of War, I don't know if you know that one. That's a dice rolling game. So easy. It's such an easy concept. It's quick. It's fun. You could play it with a 5-year-old easily. It says 14 plus on the box.
Right, okay.
I think it's because it's a sort of samurai war thing. That's the only thing I can think of. Anyway, so I just take all these ages with a pinch of salt, as I'm sure most people do.
Sure, yes.
So my second game in my top 5 is Camel Up.
Oh, good.
Oh, I just think it's great. I think it's tense. Everybody's on the edge of their seat, but it's fantastically fun at the same time. You're rooting for these little camels. The components are great. Shaking the pyramid and turning it upside down and working the rubber band thing and it getting stuck and all of that. And the camels jumping on each other. It's so it's just so kind of captivating and fun. And because it's quite quick, like you can play in half an hour, even if you're playing quite a lot of people, it doesn't seem to matter so much how well you do. It just, because you can play again quickly. So yeah, I think it's a game that people just like and want to play, and is really good family fun.
I think that's a kind of underrated aspect of games is the can I play this again this evening?
Yeah, straight. Exactly.
The favourite games in our gaming groups have always been the ones where you can just basically flip the board and try a different technique or a different plan or something like that.
Yep.
Camel Up is excellent, and also introduces sort of betting as well, doesn't it, to kids?
Yeah,
not
exactly.
not in a weird way, but,
not in a weird way, exactly. And there's quite a lot of probability in there. There's quite a lot of fairly straightforward calculations about what's more likely to happen, and that's all good stuff. And my third game, I suppose the other thing about Camel Up is that the turns are very quick. So even if you're playing with there is some downtime, particularly if you're playing with, it goes up to 8 people. You are waiting for other things to happen. But each time someone else takes a turn, or almost all the times that someone else takes a turn, what their choice impacts upon you directly. And that's different from many other games where, everybody's sort of doing their own thing and you're just waiting for people to make their decisions. So, somebody gets something out of a pyramid, so a camel moves. Oh no, I bet on that. Oh no, please don't do that. I want to do that. So what other people do impacts what you can do. The third game is Trails of Tucana. It's quite a new.
Yeah, it is.
Do you know what? I could have picked any number of games obviously I could have picked about 50 games for my top 5, but Trails of Tucana really is there to represent the roll and write genre, or indeed flip and write, because it is a card game rather than a dice game. I think this kind of game works really well with families because everybody's playing on their own board. There is no downtime at all because it's simultaneous play. and you can play with as many people as you want. It doesn't matter if someone drops out, which sometimes happens in a family game. Because everybody else can just carry on, and it plays quickly, and you can choose to play on the big island or the small island. It's 2 cards. It's a network builder, so you're all the time, all you're doing each turn is drawing one line between 2 different kinds of terrain. So it's a concept that's fairly easy to understand. It's fairly easy for younger children to join in as well as older. And I just think that I could have chosen Railroad Inc. or I could have chosen Welcome To, or Rolling Ranch, or any number of these different ones. But I think Trails of Tucana has a simplicity about it, but without losing the challenge that gives it this great replayability. And it's so easy to explain. I mean, we've been playing it. I think at the moment with lockdown, I've played more Roll and Writes than anything, because you can play online. We've just been doing so many. I've been searching through for different things to do. I've been scanning copies and sending them to my family to print. Our game group has been playing loads of Roll and Writes. We played Decathlon the other day, Rainer Knizia's Decathlon, which you can download from Board Game Geek. And it's quite luck based, but it's fun. And those sorts of things, everybody's doing something all the time. So that's why it's in my list.
I think it's very good. It's very good to represent it. Personally, I've never really taken to Roll and Writes myself. Okay. But that's just me. Our new online editor, Charlie, she absolutely loves that game, and she's been doing exactly the same thing you have, which is playing over the internet.
Exactly. But for families, the ability to have each child working on their own board and making their own decisions, and if they don't want to, not having to show anybody else what they've done at the end of the game, not having to share their scores. My nieces didn't share their scores with us when we played
on
Monday.
I like that.
Everybody else did. They said, no, thank you. I'm not going to tell you what I got.
Oh, why?
I don't want you to write it down in your score tracking app.
Oh. God.
That's fine. You can't see it.
They're trying to fudge their numbers across the season.
No, oh, it's terrible, isn't it?
I love it. It's great.
But I like that. Games that it doesn't really matter who's won at the end, where it's not obvious as you're going through who's winning. Those are brilliant for families, because it does shift the emphasis from who's won and the most important thing is about whether I've won or not, to have we enjoyed the game. And I think Roll and Writes do that really well. So they're a really good tool to have in the family board gaming kit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the 5th game, because Horrified is on the list as well, Dominion. It's a classic. It's the one game that my children, apart from Terraforming, which we've talked about already, but the children will go back to time and time and time again. I think it's had more plays than any other game in our house. I've actually just ordered another expansion for it without telling them, and it's coming today. I'm lowering my voice so they can't hear me.
And I believe they've got. Is this the 13th expansion, or is this a different? Yeah, they've got a million of them.
I've not got more, but it's it's that game in our house that I could say, who wants to play Dominion, and everybody will come, even my husband. And I think that it introduces the concept of deck building brilliantly, and that concept goes down really, really well with children. That they have control over the physical components, they have control over what they are creating, their own deck. Nobody else is going to get to play with that. It's just them. So it ticks those same boxes as the sort of roll and write mat, that this is mine, nobody else is going to touch these. The turns are really quick. And you're able to plan while other people have taken their turn, because you're picking up cards at the end of your turn and you're looking at what you've got and you're making decisions about what you're going to take. So actually there's very little downtime. There's just immense replayability. You can take out the cards that cause problems if you don't want the witch in, or the thief, or whatever other attack card makes people cry. And you can just choose not to. It's true, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely, yeah.
one of my children hates the witch and the other one hates the thief, so we tend not to play with them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that as a concept for breaking apart a game, sort of house ruling things, really. And I suppose it's a big part of getting kids in.
Oh, completely. I mean, a whole chapter in my book is about house rules and why they're really important for families, and because I think that they. I know that some, hardcore gamers might disagree with any kind of house rules, and you're supposed to play it exactly as it says. But that's silly if nobody will play with it because of some sort of problem. I mean, I was talking to a family last week who I was playing games with online, and they were saying that they like Catan, but they never get to the end. They never seem to have time. And I just said, well, why don't you just play to 8 points instead of 10 points? And it's like I'd said something that was a revelation. And I said, if you just deal out a few more resources to everybody at the beginning, give resources for both of your settlements rather than one of them. Start with double the amount of resources you normally would. Essentially, it gets it started quicker. You don't have the whole kind of slow engine thing. Oh my god! Right, we're going to go and play it. That's brilliant. I think those. So I've been quite surprised that other people aren't necessarily doing that automatically, whereas we always have. Just changing rules to make the game more interesting. We often change. We change. We kind of pimp up old proper children's games to make them more interesting. I've done a video about how to make Guess Who interesting, because I still love the components in Guess Who. They're brilliant.
You can't argue with that at all. No, and also the very basic thrill of flicking the faces down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love those boards. I think they're great, but it is a bit dull to keep playing by the same rules. So house rules for making games more interesting, house rules for adapting the length of a game, house rules for making them more accessible, to level the playing field for younger players, or handicapping old ones. That sort of thing. If you're playing something like Cluedo or some other kind of deduction game, giving those children more information, because deduction games are really hard to play on an even field. It's not. If we're going to play Cluedo, I will always win because of my ability to logical deduction that is developed over kind of years of doing that kind of, I suppose just practiced over years. And it's much harder for children to, I write down every bit of information I learn, just what other cards other people are seeing, and but children aren't going to be bothered to do that. So you have to give them more cards in the first place. They've got more information, so they are at an advantage to start with. Just to balance it up a bit, really.
I think that's and I suppose part of that is also then to avoid sort of tantrums and things like that. And just keeping things sane at the table.
Exactly. It's avoiding tantrums and arguments, tears. It is a real challenge for parents, and it's the biggest reason why I think why parents struggle, because either children always want to win, or they cry if they don't win, or they cry if somebody takes what they want, or they're screaming at their brother because they're being nasty, and you're playing a game with take that in it. You have to make decisions about your choice of games depending on your children and what's likely to happen. This is why some of these games in my top 5 are in my top 5, because they're more likely to be successful at doing those sorts of games. But I think another reason that we might struggle as game playing parents is that we just want to play the game. We want to get our children to play the game so that we can play a game.
Yes, that's
it. And actually, you've got a more important job when you're playing a game with your family, and that's to make sure that the experience is pleasant for everybody. That your job really isn't to play the game to your best ability and immerse yourself in the game to the expense of everything else. You are playing the game of the long-term game of making the children into board game players. And to do that, you've got to be aware of what they're doing and how they're feeling. You've got to make sure that you're checking your own natural behaviour, for example, just focusing on your own cards and not looking up from them, making sure that you're watching when other people do things and saying, oh, that was brilliant, that's an excellent move, I think you made a really good choice there. Or noticing when they're a bit wobbly and giving them some, words of encouragement. Noticing when they are really not wanting you to give them advice and shut up. Because they need to make their own decisions.
Sounds like that one might be the most difficult one.
Some people it really is, and others are more natural at it. I learned that really children don't want strategic advice. That it's part of how you teach a child a game. Avoid telling them what strategies they should be employing, even if you think that that they really ought to know this because it's going to help them win. It doesn't matter whether they win or not. And you know that because you keep saying.
That's also the point. One of the things you're trying to teach them, isn't it? You should just teach them the rules, the mechanics, how to play a game, and let them make decisions. And it doesn't matter if they don't win. And you shouldn't let children win. That I'm totally against rigged victories. I will play and try and win, but I won't need to win. And that's this kind of mantra that I try and teach my children: play to win, but don't need to win. And focusing on the good decisions that they're making during the game, focusing on praising them when they've, got over something that's happened, like someone has taken the dice that they wanted or the cube that they wanted or gone on the space that they wanted to go on. Praising them for managing their own behaviour in those difficult situations goes a long way to them, really, what they want to impress you at the end of the day. They want to win because they want to impress you. And they don't want to accept advice because they want to show you that they can do it without your advice. They want to impress you. And so if you show them that you're impressed with the decisions they're taking and the way they're behaving, that's enough. And it takes time to get to the point where they really understand that it's the playing that you're looking at, and you don't care what the outcome is, and they shouldn't either. But that's that's where we're trying to get to, I think. I think that's a really good point to sort of end that section on. That's a nice upbeat ending. So should we talk about your games? Just
sure,
because there's a whole load of stuff you've put together. There's for example, there's I've seen the Puzzle Box. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, the Puzzle Box is a sort of it's a board game and puzzle box designed for families. Within each, so at the moment there are 2 puzzle boxes. The third one will be coming out later this year. Each puzzle box has a theme. So the first one is gardens and chickens, and the second one is donuts and cake. And within the puzzle box, there's a sort of a bigger game, a board game with quite a few components, either tiles or boards, individual player boards and things, and it kind of might sprawl across the table. And then there's a smaller game which is in a tin, like a tobacco tin sized tin, and would fit in your handbag or rucksack or in the glove compartment of your car, or wherever, so it's portable, easy to take on holiday. And some of them are card games, and some of them have got little cubes in, and then there's also a game on a coaster in each. So I've just got these delivered yesterday. You can see them. I know nobody else can see.
It looks very good though.
Yeah, so there's sort of beer mats, and there's a game on one side. There's the instructions on the other side, and they're simple, and you can just shove them in your bag again. So there's one of those in each of the puzzle boxes, and then there's puzzles as well. The puzzles so I design all the games. My friend David Brain who's the designer of Key Market, amongst other things, but that's in that's the kind of Key Flower series, Keeper, that kind of cathedral. He is a puzzle writer, and he has designed all the puzzles for the puzzle box. So each one has a series of puzzles in as well, and then each box has a series of game cards, which are games that you can play with cards in the public domain, cards or pen and paper or dominoes or dice, things that you might have in the house. And the idea is that families create a sort of binder of these games as they get different puzzle boxes. So all of the games that you get in a puzzle box, you can also get that you can also buy as individual games. So in the first one, there's in the first puzzle box, there's a game called Gnome Grown, which is about creating your own garden. And it's as we talked about, kind of the idea of having your own board. So you've got your own garden board. You are getting 3 different kinds of tiles in 3 different kinds of ways to create your garden. So there's tile laying, you're working to objective cards, you're trying to get more objective cards. It's a worker placement, tile placement game. And there's some bidding in there as well. And the currency's ladybirds. And it's quite nice. There's this gorgeous little gnome miniature that sort of goes along the garden path, signalling what round you're in. You have to pay the gnome in ladybirds to take certain actions. There's quite a lot of, it introduces families to quite a lot of different kind of hardcore gaming concepts like worker placement and tile placement and the bidding and things like that. Then there's a game called Don't Count Your Chickens, which is which is a game of hidden information where you're trying to kind of develop your own flock of chickens and roosters and turkeys, but you're not sure which one is the most valuable, and each game is different. So you have cards that are hidden, which you have to take actions to look at, but if you're taking the actions to discover the information, you can't take the actions that are going to develop your flock. And there are sort of wild actions, which mean that you might end up having to give your chickens to another player. And if you don't know that's one of the hidden pieces of information, then you're going to be scuppered at the end of the game. So you have to, there's this real tension between, do I find out the information or do I grow my flock? And the latest puzzle box, the Donuts and Cakes one, has got a game called Donut Dash in it, which is a gang. You've got a gang of donut thieves that are going around a donut factory, stealing donuts from the floor and stealing donuts from other people. It's a sort of grid movement. It's a riot, actually. It's really fun. You stack these donuts on top of each other, and there's all these kind of cards which allow you to kind of shift the floor, and there's all these booby traps and things, and it's a nice thematic fun game. And then finally there's a game called Topcake, and that is a card game which you're bidding on layers of cake to try and stack them in the most and you're trying to kind of create the cake stack with that's going to win the most points at the end of the game.
It's like a very confectionery heavy list.
Donuts and cake themed box. Yeah. The next one has got a space theme that's coming out later this year. So I'm going to be putting one of those games on Kickstarter.
Cool.
As well later in the year. Uranus.
That's very exciting.
Yes.
And you've got the Placemat Games as well, which is sort of a perfectly timed lockdown.
Yes, they are lockdown ready. They are an A3 placemat with a game on each side. They come in pads of 50, and each of the so you've got 50 of each game, and each player needs a placemat, and they're roll and write games, and they've sort of both got a desert island type feel, and you roll dice, you share the outcome with everybody, so everybody uses the same dice rolls, and you're going to do various things. So in one of them, Beach Life, you are kind of helping various sea creatures, and in the other one, Castaway, you're kind of trying to develop your island that you've been stranded on, to work out whether you can get rescued, to try and improve your chance of getting rescued, or if you choose to try and become self-sustained. So yeah, these work really well. Yeah, that's good. They work really well online. I've got quite a lot of people buy. So actually, I've got schools buying them for children, and playing with the teachers playing with the class online. I've got families buying them and then sending pads to grandparents so they can play online with them. I've got families joining me for online game sessions, which I'm running every Tuesday. to play these games, and you can register on the site. And so there's all sorts of different things, all sorts of different people playing, and you can play with as many people as you want. So they're quite nice, really.
It's excellent. Hopefully we'll be playing one of these together at some point in the near future, and everyone can see how bad I am at roll and write games. That's great. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Ellie.
Thank you. Lovely.
And so where can we find you online?
So on Twitter, I'm at Ellie Dix Tweets. Dix is D-I-X, at Ellie Dix Tweets. The website is thedarkimp.com, and you can get the games from there as well. And my email address is ellie@thedarkimp.com.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And thank you for your guidance on how to create better families. It's gaming families. Sorry.
Better gaming families. Nice to speak to you.
Thanks for listening. Our theme music is by Body in the Thames, which you can find at bodyinthethames.bandcamp.com. You can find us on tabletopgaming.co.uk. You can follow us on Twitter at tabletopmag, on Facebook at Tabletop Gaming Magazine, on Instagram at tabletop_gaming_magazine, and we've just launched a Twitch channel. You can find us there on twitch.tv/tabletopgamingmag. If you like the show, recommend it to a friend, rate us in the iTunes store, or subscribe to the magazine, which you can do on our website.